So, ladies and gentlemen, we all know so far, if you've been following my YouTube channel over the last number of years, I'm a big fan of Laurence Harvey and I'm a big fan of Elizabeth Taylor. Now, when I first saw them together in Butterfield 8, which came out several years before I was born, I was more impressed with Laurence Harvey because I hadn't seen the Manchurian Candidate yet, or the Alamo, but my dad said once you start watching him on screen, you're going to see he's probably one of the most underrated actors of all time. Now, we've talked about the different lives of Laurence Harvey, the fact he wasn't too well liked in Hollywood by certain people. Of course, he's a classic episode of The Night Gallery where he played the rotten character who was trying to stir the shit in, I think, Borneo, in The Caterpillar, where he tried to kill his boss via an earwig through a paid assassin, but the earwig goes in his head instead. It's probably one of the best episodes Searling ever put together, Twilight Zone or Night Gallery. But this movie has kind of been forgotten because it's the second movie that features Taylor and Laurence Harvey, kind of a remake of Gaslight. Now, one of the followers of the channel asked me, "Do you remember this movie?" Well, I said yes, but I said, "Is that a request?" And I never got a word back. So just by mentioning the movie, we do that sometimes. So it's kind of fulfilling a non-request. So this is Night Watch. Came out in '73, directed by Brian Hutton, with a screenplay by Tony Williamson, based on the '72 play of the same name by the great Lucille Fletcher, a well-known kind of gothic, creeping horror writer who did The Hitchhiker, which was eventually adapted for several media, including The Twilight Zone. She was married to Bernard Herrmann for a while, and everybody knows his music is kind of the most gothic of the 20th century. Now, the film reunited Elizabeth Taylor with co-star Laurence Harvey from their 1980 collaboration Butterfield 8. It was the last time the pair acted together on screen. Some of the story elements recall the plot outline of the '44 film Gaslight. Now, in London, during a raging snowstorm one night, Ellen Wheeler frantically tells her husband John that from the living room window she has seen a man with his throat slit in a chair by the window in. So like we mentioned, as the scene goes on, she has seen a man with his throat slit in a chair by the window in a large old deserted house across the way. John calls the police, but a search of the old house finds no evidence of a murder. The next morning, Ellen notices a freshly painted bed of laburnum in the garden next to the old house that was not there before. She calls the investigative detective, Inspector Walker, and suggests that the body of the murder victim she witnessed may be buried there. Inspector Walker questions the reclusive neighbor, Mr. Appleby, who confirms that he planted the trees the night before during the storm, but refuses to let the police search the garden or dig up the trees. Now, Ellen is recovering from a nervous breakdown that occurred after her unfaithful first husband, Carl, was killed a few years earlier in an auto accident with his young paramour while suffering from recurring nightmares of the accident. After learning that Ellen has called Inspector Walker multiple times about the investigation, John suggests that he sees psychiatrist friend Tony. Indignant, Ellen continues to insist that she saw murder in a deserted house, but since there is no proof, John remains skeptical. Now, Ellen's visiting friend Sarah Cook is equally skeptical, suggesting that Ellen sees what she thinks she sees because of her recent nervous breakdown. That night, when both Ellen and Sarah see a light moving behind the old house's shutters, they call the cops but discover Appleby wandering around with a flashlight and arrest him for trespassing. A second search of the house and excavation of the garden reveal nothing, and Inspector Walker privately tells John that the case is now officially closed. Now, that evening, Ellen claims to John and Sarah that she saw another body in the old house. That of a woman. Ellen is then sedated by John and Sarah as a result, who believe that Ellen may be losing her mind. The next day, Ellen agrees to see Tony, and during their conversation, recounts Carl's fatal car accident. Tony advises her to check into a clinic in Switzerland for a few weeks, to which Ellen agrees. Shortly afterwards, Ellen calls Inspector Walker and urges him to search the whole house again. After falsely promising to do so, he reveals that the house was purchased 6 months earlier by a private company, Dipco. Now, the following evening, as Ellen prepares to depart for Switzerland, John asks her to sign several financial documents, including one that grants him power of attorney over their financial holdings. She complies before noticing the documents that John had recently acquired Dipco. Ellen angrily accuses John and Sarah of having an affair and plotting to torment her in order to have her committed, showing him the key to the old house. When John denies Ellen's accusations, she runs to the old house and lets herself inside using the key. John and Sarah both chase after her. Ellen lures the two to the second floor room where she claimed to have seen the bodies. There, she slashes John's throat and viciously stabs Sarah to death before positioning them in exactly the same manner that she claimed to have seen both the bodies. It is revealed that Ellen had feigned insanity by claiming to have witnessed two murders in the old house as part of an elaborate scheme to murder both John and Sarah for their affair, and to so weary the police with repeated phone calls in order to dissuade them from investigating the house and finding the bodies of John and Sarah. Appleby, whose father owned John and Ellen's house before he purchased it, makes a surprise visit, startling Ellen and congratulating her on putting off her scheme. He assures her that he does not intend to report the murders, as Inspector Walker would not believe him. Ellen asks Appleby to look after her house and the garden until she returns. Appleby happily agrees as Ellen bids him goodbye and departs. So it's basically, pulling in and pulling out, but Fletcher's play is really shown tight in this movie. Now, what's ironic about this, Billy Whitelaw later became a more recognized star for work in The Omen. Now, cinematography was by Billiam Williams, with editing by John Jepson, music by John Cameron. Now, Brute Productions and Nightwad Films put it together, and of course, that great car and insurance company, AFCO Embassy, distributed it. Now, it came out the 10th of August, 73 in the States, and 3 weeks later in the UK. Now, 99 minutes, for some it goes fast, some it goes slow. When I first saw it, I basically saw it in French, so I couldn't say either way. I haven't seen it in English, but from what people are telling me, it's, like I said, it's pretty tight in my natural language. Now, again, based on a play by Fletcher, and Joan Hackett actually played it. Joan's a little bit older and a little bit less beautiful than Taylor. Now, when the play opened in February 72, the New York Times called it the most excellent thriller, a first-class example of a genre. Now, film rights to the play were bought prior to the play reaching Broadway by producer Martin Pohl. He set up the film at Brute Productions, a newly formed film division of Fabergé Company, run by George Barry. And yes, the Brute Productions was based on Brute male body, not spray, but you put it on after a shave there. It was one of the first films for the company, Paul said. It's really a lot more now than a suspense story. It deals with a relationship between people torn by their emotions, their betrayals, and jealousies. Now, Taylor was doing a lot of movies at this time, her and Burton, at different locations around the world, and some were hits and some were misses. Now, it was decided to really relocate the story to England. Now, the film was shot at Elstree Studios, one of the best locations in the country. Brute financed the film entirely, with Taylor taking a smaller salary in exchange for a larger percentage. Director Brian G. Hutton had just made X, Y, and Z with Taylor, which came out in 72, and if you've never heard of it, very few people have. Harvey's casting was announced in April 72. Barry would later finance Harvey's last film, Welcome to Arrow Beach. I think at the time his cancer was in full blown. Now, filming was interrupted several times. It was shut down for a week. Get this, when one of the major when Hutton got sick. Now it's more of a fact. Why would something take care of it? Now, it was delayed for 6 more weeks so Harvey could have an operation on his stomach. Now, Harvey said at the time that the operation was due to appendicitis, but it was in fact stomach cancer, which killed him shortly after the picture was released. Now, filming wrapped in September 1972. Now, the big problem is here, I don't think Harvey wanted to let on what was going on, even with Night Gallery, because of insurance demands. Now, although Barry and John Cameron composed the musical score of the film, with the director being sick, Cameron was credited for it. The background music for a significant part of the film is Brahms' Piano Concerto No. 2 and Schubert's Unfinished Symphony. Now, in February 73, AFCO Embassy agreed to distribute the film along with another Brute production, A Touch of Class. Now, I think this came as a double to either drive-ins or limited occasions. Of course, A Touch of Class, the Glenda Jackson Oscar winner. Now, Time Out liked it, called it but also give A negative same time, call it a tired old-fashioned thriller. Old-fashioned thriller was a compliment, tired was not. Whereas the New York Times wrote, Taylor, in About Time, has got herself a good picture and a whodunit at that. And Variety opined, Lucille Fletcher's Night Watch is in the first average stage play, returned in a better than average film, astute direction and improved cast, more than help. Now, what really stands out for a lot of people, if you're a Laurence Harvey fan, if you're a completist, it's the movie you have to see. But you can see in certain scenes he was suffering. You saw it in the Columbo episode where he played that chess master who killed his biggest rival. You saw it in Night Gallery, and Joanna Pettit, I mentioned several times, she knew how sick Lawrence was. He kept it with his close friends, but like I said, when he passed away, like everybody was saying, we saw it, but we didn't see it. It is what it is. It's like anything in Hollywood is all perception. Eh? But Laurence Harvey, it's been literally more than 50 years since he was a top 10 British actor of the modern era. And boys, we miss him. Laurence Harvey's style, he could play any type of part. But I mean, I grew up watching all these key movies. After, I go back to Manchurian Candidate 5 or 6 times a year. I go back to the Caterpillar several times a year. And General Schwartz and a lot of directors are saying he was an interesting cat to work with, because there's a comment in Scott Skelton's book about Night Gallery where I guess he showed up and he saw how it was low end in the Borneo set for the Caterpillar. He said, "This is what I've come down to," but he just hit it out of the park. And coming off the Night Gallery episode and doing this, I think he had a last burst of energy. That's what happens sometimes with cancer patients, stage 3 or into stage 4, they have last bursts of energy. But Laurence Harvey, we really miss him. Whether Hollywood liked him or not, I like him, and I know a lot of followers on their channel do as well. And Elizabeth Taylor and him. Be interesting if he would have done like a detective story, like Scotland Yard. She and him are exes, and they work together as police officers to solve a murder. I would love to see that. But what really stopped it, of course, Lawrence was that sick. He could do so much. So, ladies and gentlemen, if you like what we're doing with our Laurence Harvey podcast and our Elizabeth Taylor reviews, let us know with a like, comment, subscribe, or share. And don't forget, with the NHL playoffs going on, if you want to get a break from all the sports going on, come here. We have an archive of over 3,000 podcasts of movies and television. If you like what we're doing, also we take requests. Don't be scared to also say if you don't like something, but be reasonable. If you're acting like an idiot, you're going to get banned. But if you're acting like a person who really backs up what you're saying, I'm going to post it, because I got to protect my other people as well. Because if you're insulting the guy in the channel and he's not telling you, okay, calm down, class, calm down. I'm the teacher here. This is an essay version. It's not really review. I'm a historical essayist. I will say if a movie's bad or not. You can't say this movie's bad or not, because like any thriller like this, it's in the eye of the beholder. So it can't really be promoted or criticized. It's just what it is. It's like Jodie Foster, the little girl who lives down the lane. Some people hate it because it promotes pedophilia. Some people hate it because it promotes matricide, because the landlord, she's knocked out by Jodie Foster. And, it has teen sex, but that's the movie of its time. You can't really criticize something that wasn't criticized at the time. You can't just go back in time and say, well, the 10 Commandments shouldn't have killed of all those Egyptians. Shouldn't have killed them, because the Egyptians are nice people. I mean, it doesn't work. A movie is a movie. Thanks for listening, and have a great day.